The Galactic Council had existed for 12,000 cycles. In all that time, it had seen empires rise and fall. It had watched young species take their first steps into the void between stars. It had guided civilizations through wars and plagues and disasters that would have destroyed lesser beings. The Council was old. The Council was wise. The Council believed it had seen everything the universe could offer. It was wrong. High Arbiter stood in the central chamber of Station Prime, his 4 arms folded behind his back as he studied the holographic display before him. He was tall and slender, with skin like polished silver and eyes that glowed with soft blue light. His species had founded the Council ago, and they still held the highest positions of authority. It was their right, their duty. The display showed a map of known space, 93 species, thousands of worlds, millions of ships traveling along established trade routes. Everything was in order. Everything was as it should be. Then the alert came. "High Arbiter," said a voice behind him, turned to see Senior Analyst approaching, her movements quick and nervous. "We have detected an anomaly in Sector 7. His eyes narrowed. Sector 7 was on the far edge of Council space, near a region they had quarantined long ago. The Orion Spur, the younger species called it, a chaotic place of young stars and unstable worlds. The Council had studied it centuries ago and determined that no intelligent life could evolve there. The conditions were too harsh, too unpredictable. "What kind of anomaly?" he asked. His fingers danced over her control pad and the holographic display shifted. It zoomed in on a section of space near the quarantine zone. There, blinking red, was a cluster of signals. "We detected them 3 rotations ago," explained. "At first we thought it was debris, a destroyed ship perhaps or fragments from a collision, but the signals are organized, patterned. High Arbiter, they appear to be artificial." Leaned closer to the display. The signals were moving, slowly, incredibly slowly by Council standards, but moving nonetheless, and they were heading toward Council space. "How many?" he asked. "We count approximately 4,000 individual sources, possibly more." 4,000, that was not a small number, felt a flicker of concern, but he pushed it aside. Whatever these objects were, they were clearly primitive. Their speed was laughable. A Council ship could cross that same distance in a matter of days. These objects would take, he calculated quickly, decades, perhaps centuries. "Have you analyzed the signals themselves?" Nodded. "That is why I came to you personally, High Arbiter. The signals are not random. They are structured, repeating. Our translation matrices have been working on them since detection." She paused, her expression troubled. "They contain linguistic patterns." Went very still. "Language?" "Yes, High Arbiter. Multiple languages, in fact. Over 300 distinct linguistic structures, none of which match any known species in our database." For a long moment said nothing. He simply stared at the blinking signals on the display. In 12,000 cycles, the Council had encountered many species. Some had been primitive, some had been advanced. All of them had eventually been assessed and either admitted to the Council or dealt with. But never, not once, had a species emerged from the quarantine zone. "Convene the Council," said finally. "All ambassadors, full assembly." Bowed and hurried away. Remained where he was, watching the signals crawl across the display like insects on glass. 4,000 ships, over 300 languages, a species that had somehow evolved in the most hostile region of known space. For the first time in centuries, felt something he had almost forgotten. Curiosity. The Council chamber was the largest structure on Station Prime. It had been designed to accommodate representatives from every member species, from the massive who stood 30 feet tall to the tiny who could fit in the palm of a hand. Today, all 93 delegations had assembled. The chamber hummed with conversation in dozens of languages, all translated seamlessly by the station systems. took his place at the central podium and raised his arms for silence. The chamber fell quiet immediately. Whatever else the council's members might think of each other, they all respected the authority of the High Arbiter. "Honored delegates," began, "I have called this assembly to address a matter of significant importance. 3 rotations ago, our long-range sensors detected an anomaly in Sector 7, near the Orion Spur quarantine zone." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. The quarantine zone was not a popular topic. Many species had lost exploratory vessels there before the Council had declared it off-limits. "The anomaly," continued, "consists of approximately 4,000 artificial structures. They are transmitting signals in over 300 distinct languages. None of these languages match any known species in our database." The murmurs grew louder. Ambassador of the Owl rose from his seat. The Owl were in species, tall and angular, with compound eyes that reflected the chamber's lights like shattered mirrors. They were known for their logic, their patience, and their skill in diplomatic matters. "High Arbiter," said, his voice a precise series of clicks translated smoothly by the chamber's systems. "Are you suggesting that a new species has emerged from the quarantine zone?" "I am not suggesting anything, Ambassador. I am presenting facts. The signals are artificial. They contain language. They are approaching Council space. What conclusions we draw from these facts is why I have convened this assembly." Another delegate rose, a named owl, his massive form casting shadows across the smaller species nearby. "The quarantine zone was declared off-limits for good reason," he rumbled. "The stars there are unstable. The planets are toxic. We determined ago that sapient life could not evolve in such conditions. If these signals are genuine, then either our original assessment was wrong, or," he paused, his small eyes narrowing, "or someone is playing games with us." "Our analysts have the signals," replied. "They are genuine. As for our original assessment," he spread his arms in a gesture of uncertainty, "it appears we may have been mistaken." The chamber erupted in argument. The Council had never been wrong about something this significant. The quarantine zone had been studied extensively. Every model, every simulation, every analysis had confirmed the same conclusion. No intelligent life could arise there. And yet, Ambassador raised one segmented limb, and the chamber gradually fell silent again. "High Arbiter," he said, "what do you propose?" "Had been considering this question since the signals were first detected. I propose we send an observation fleet, a small force, diplomatic vessels only. We will approach these structures, assess their nature, and determine what threat, if any, they pose to the Council." "And if they are hostile," Al demanded, "then we will respond accordingly. But I do not believe that will be necessary. Look at the data, honored delegates. These structures are slow, primitive. They are traveling at sublight speeds. Whatever species built them, they clearly lack faster-than-light capability. They are no threat to us." The vote was called. The motion passed with a comfortable majority. An observation fleet would be dispatched immediately. As the delegates filed out of the chamber approached, "You seem confident, High Arbiter," the owl observed. Allowed himself a thin smile. "I am confident in the Council's ability to handle whatever we find, Ambassador. We have faced far greater challenges than a primitive species crawling out of the quarantine zone." His compound eyes studied him for a long moment. "I hope you are right," he said finally, "but something about this troubles me. A species that evolved where no species should be able to evolve. They may not think the way we expect." "Then we will learn how they think," replied, "and we will adapt." Made a sound that might have been agreement or might have been skepticism. Then he turned and left the chamber, his angular legs clicking against the polished floor. Watched him go, then turned back to the holographic display still hovering above the podium. The signals continued to blink, continued to crawl toward Council space. 4,000 ships, a species from the impossible region. Who were they? What did they want? Soon he would have his answers. The observation fleet reached Sector 7 after 12 days of travel. It consisted of 5 diplomatic vessels, sleek, elegant craft designed for speed and communication rather than combat. At its head was the Whisper of Stars, commanded by Captain, a veteran officer with centuries of experience. As the fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel, felt her breath catch in her throat. The reports had said 4,000 ships. The reports had been wrong. There were more, many more. The space before her was filled with vessels of every shape and size. Some were enormous, great cylindrical structures that stretched for kilometers, rotating slowly to generate artificial gravity. Others were smaller, clustered around the larger ships like children around their parents, and all of them were moving, slowly, steadily, inexorably. "By the Founders," whispered her first officer, a young named, "there must be tens of thousands of them." Forced herself to focus. "Begin scanning. I want full analysis of every vessel within sensor range, and open communication channels. Let them know we are here." The crew moved to obey. Minutes passed, then hours. The diplomatic fleet held position, broadcasting greetings in every language the Council knew, while sensors probed the alien armada. The data that came back was confusing. The alien vessels were made of metal, simple metal, iron, steel, titanium, materials that the Council had stopped using ago. Their propulsion systems were based on chemical reactions and nuclear fission, ancient technologies, inefficient technologies. And yet the vessels were clearly inhabited. Life signs registered on every ship, millions of life signs, perhaps billions. "Captain," said suddenly, "we are receiving a response." Straightened on screen. The main display flickered, then resolved into an image. Had seen many alien species in her long career. She had learned not to react to strange appearances. But this. The creature on the screen was soft. That was her first impression. Soft and fragile with no visible armor or natural weapons. It had 2 arms, 2 legs, and a single head covered in dark filaments. Its eyes were small and forward-facing, like a predator's. Its mouth moved, producing sounds that the translation matrix struggled to process. Then the translation caught up, and the creature's words became clear. "Unknown vessels, this is Captain of the United Earth Coalition ship Endeavor's Hope. We come in peace. Please identify yourselves." Exchanged a glance with the creature, this captain seemed calm, almost relaxed, as if encountering an alien fleet was an everyday occurrence. "This is Captain of the Galactic Council Observation Fleet," replied carefully. "We detected your approach and came to investigate. You have entered Council space." There was a pause. Then Captain's mouth curved upward, exposing white teeth. A threat display, or something else. "Council space," repeated. "So there is a galactic government. We hoped there might be. It's good to meet you, Captain. We've been traveling for a very long time." "How long?" asked. "This particular fleet has been in transit for 412 years. Some of our generation ships have been traveling longer. The first wave left Earth almost 6 centuries ago." 6 centuries. Felt a chill run through her. These creatures had been traveling through space for 600 years, crossing distances that the Council could cross in days, simply because they had no other choice. "Why?" she asked. "Why would you undertake such a journey?" Captain's expression changed. The teeth disappeared. Her eyes grew distant. "Because we had to," she said. "Because our world was dying and we refused to die with it. Because we looked up at the stars and decided that if we couldn't survive where we were, we would find somewhere else, somewhere better." Her gaze focused again, meeting through the screen. "We are humanity, Captain, and we have come a very long way to be here." Was silent for a long moment. She thought about the Council's assessment of the quarantine zone, the harsh conditions, the impossible odds, and she thought about these creatures, these humans, who had looked at those odds and refused to accept them. "Captain," she said finally, "I believe we have much to discuss." The report sent back to Station Prime caused an immediate sensation. An entirely new species, billions of individuals, technology primitive but functional, and a story that everything the Council thought it knew about the limits of sapient determination. High Arbiter read the report 3 times, then he called another assembly. "They call themselves humanity," he announced to the gathered delegates. "They evolved on a planet called Earth, in a solar system deep within the quarantine zone. Their world suffered multiple extinction events, climate disasters, and resource depletion. Rather than accept their fate, they built ships and launched themselves into space." "Without faster-than-light travel?" Ambassador asked, his voice sharp with disbelief. "Without faster-than-light travel," confirmed. "They built generation ships, vessels designed to sustain populations for centuries. The individuals who launched these ships knew they would never reach their destination. They knew their children would never reach it. They built them anyway, trusting that their descendants, generations later, would complete the journey." The chamber was silent. Such a thing was almost unimaginable. To sacrifice not just yourself but your children and your children's children for a goal you would never see achieved. It required a kind of determination that bordered on madness. Or perhaps, thought, it simply required desperation. "What do they want?" Al rumbled. "According to Captain's report, they want only a place to live, worlds to settle, resources to sustain their population. They are willing to negotiate, willing to trade, willing to abide by Council law. And if we refuse?" Considered the question. "Then they will likely continue on, find worlds beyond Council space, build their own civilization without our assistance." He paused. "But I do not recommend refusal. These humans are primitive, yes, but they are also determined, adaptable. They survived conditions that should have killed them. They crossed distances that should have been impossible. I believe it would be better to have them as members of the Council than as potential rivals outside it." The debate lasted for hours. Some delegates argued for caution. Others argued for immediate alliance. Still others suggested that the humans should be quarantined themselves, kept isolated until the Council could be certain they posed no threat. In the end, the vote was close, but the motion passed. Humanity would be granted provisional observer status. They would be given a small allocation of territory, a handful of systems on the edge of Council space, worlds that no other species wanted. They would be allowed to trade, to travel, to participate in Council affairs in a limited capacity. And they would be watched carefully. Ambassador was appointed to lead the diplomatic mission. He would travel to the human fleet, formally welcome them to Council space, and oversee their integration into galactic society. As the assembly concluded, approached the Al ambassador. "You seem troubled." The diplomat's compound eyes glittered. "I am uncertain, High Arbiter. I have read the same reports you have. These humans are fascinating creatures, but I cannot shake the feeling that we are making a mistake." "What kind of mistake?" Was silent for a moment. "We are treating them like any other primitive species," he said finally. "Granting them charity, expecting them to be grateful for whatever scraps we offer. But these are not ordinary primitives. They crossed the void between stars without the technology to do so. They survived for centuries in conditions that would have destroyed any other species. They did not give up. They did not accept their fate. They fought against the universe itself, and they won." "And your concern?" "My concern," said slowly, "is that we do not truly understand what we are dealing with. We see a primitive species, fragile bodies, short, limited technology. But I wonder if we are looking at the wrong things. I wonder if we are missing something important." "Considered this, what do you suggest?" "Nothing for now. I will conduct my diplomatic mission. I will welcome these humans to Council space, and I will watch them very, very carefully." Turned to leave, then paused. "But I will tell you this, High Arbiter. In all my centuries of service, I have never encountered a species quite like this one. and I'm not sure if that should excite me or terrify me." He left the chamber, his footsteps clicking against the floor. Stood alone in the empty space thinking about the ambassador's words, primitive, fragile, short-lived. And yet they had crossed the stars. He shook his head slightly and turned away. The humans were here now. The council would manage them as it had managed every other species that had joined its ranks. There was nothing to fear, nothing at all. The High Arbiter of the Galactic Council walked out of the chamber and did not look back. He did not see the holographic display still glowing behind him, showing the human fleet spreading slowly across the sector. He did not see the tiny lights, each one representing a ship full of creatures who had refused to die. And he did not realize, could not realize, that the universe had just changed forever. The humans had arrived, and nothing would ever be the same. Ambassador had been a diplomat for over 400 cycles. He had negotiated treaties with species that communicated through light patterns. He had calmed conflicts between civilizations that had been at war for. He had welcomed dozens of new species into the council, guiding them through the complex process of galactic integration. But he had never encountered anything quite like the humans. The diplomatic shuttle approached the human flagship slowly, giving both sides time to scan and assess each other. Through the viewport watched the massive vessel grow larger. The Endeavor's hope was enormous by human standards, nearly 3 kilometers long, a great cylinder of metal and glass spinning slowly against the stars. By council standards, it was crude. The construction was rough. The design was inefficient. The technology that powered it was laughably primitive. And yet it had crossed the void between stars. It had kept its passengers alive for over 4 centuries. It had done the impossible. "Ambassador," said his aide, a young owl named, "the humans have opened their docking bay. They are ready to receive us." Nodded, "Then let us not keep them waiting." The shuttle glided into the human ship's docking bay with practiced precision. As the airlock cycled and the doors opened, took his first breath of human air. It was strange, thick with oxygen far more than the council's standard. There were other scents too, things he could not identify, organic compounds, chemical traces, the smell of a living ship filled with millions of living beings. A delegation was waiting for them. At its head stood Captain, the woman had seen on the communication screens. She was shorter than he had expected, barely reaching his thorax, with brown skin and dark hair pulled back from her face. She wore a uniform of some kind, blue and black, with symbols on her shoulders that presumably indicated rank. As approach did something unexpected. She smiled, that strange expression that showed her teeth, and extended one hand toward him. "Ambassador," she said warmly, "welcome aboard the Endeavor's Hope. It's an honor to meet you." Studied the extended hand. His compound eyes analyzed the gesture from multiple angles. It did not appear to be a threat. The hand was empty, the posture relaxed. Some kind of greeting, then. He reached out with one of his own limbs and touched her hand lightly. Smile widened, and she gripped his appendage firmly, moving it up and down. "It's called a handshake," she explained. "A traditional human greeting. It shows that we come in peace with no weapons in our hands." "A practical custom," observed. "Among my people, we communicate trust through the positioning of our antennae, but I appreciate the explanation, Captain. Please call me and let me introduce my team." She gestured to the others behind her. "This is Doctor, our Chief Science Officer, Doctor, Head of Medical, Commander James, my first officer, and this," she indicated a small human who barely reached lower thorax, "is Maya, the youngest member of our delegation. She was born on this ship, as was her mother and her grandmother before that." The small human, a child, realized, looked up at him with wide eyes. She showed no fear, only curiosity. "Are you really from another planet?" she asked. Maya said gently, "We talked about this. Let the ambassador speak first." "It is quite all right," said. He lowered himself slightly to bring his eyes closer to the child's level. Yes, young one. I am from a world called very far from here, and you are from a world called Earth, which is also very far from here. We are both travelers, you and I. Maya smiled, apparently satisfied with this answer, placed a hand on the child's shoulder and guided her back to the other humans. Shall we walk? Suggested. I would like to show you our ship, Ambassador, help you understand who we are and where we came from. Inclined his head in agreement. I would be honored. They walked through the corridors of the Endeavor's Hope and observed everything. The ship was crowded, humans everywhere going about their daily tasks, tending to machinery, caring for children, preparing food. They stared at the alien delegation with open curiosity, but they did not seem afraid. Some even waved or called out greetings. You do not fear us, observed. Should we? Asked. Many species fear what they do not understand. First contact is often tense. Nodded thoughtfully. I suppose we've had a long time to think about this moment. Our ancestors dreamed of meeting alien life. They wrote stories about it, made movies about it. Some of those stories were about friendly aliens. Some were about hostile ones. But we always hoped, always believed that we were not alone in the universe. And when you finally received confirmation that you were not alone, when our observation fleet appeared. Smile turned wry. There was some panic, I won't lie. A few people wanted to run. A few wanted to fight, but most of us just felt relief. We had been traveling for so long, generations born and died on these ships, never seeing anything but empty space. And then suddenly there you were, proof that we had made the right choice, proof that there was something out there worth finding. They reached a large observation deck. One entire wall was transparent, showing the vastness of space outside. Stars glittered in the distance. Other human ships were visible, slowly drifting through the void. 4,000 ships, said quietly. That is what our sensors originally detected, but there are more than that, are there not? Many more, confirmed. This is just one fleet. There are others scattered across this region of space. Some are still traveling. Some have already found worlds to settle. We don't have exact numbers, but we estimate there are at least 50 million humans in this sector alone. 50 million. Processed this information. It was a significant number, larger than some council member species. And these were just the ones who had made it this far. How many more were still out there, still traveling, still searching? Tell me about your world, he said. Tell me about Earth. Was quiet for a moment. Then she turned to face the viewport, her eyes distant. Earth was beautiful, she said softly. Green forests, blue oceans, mountains that touched the sky. It was the only home we had ever known, the only home we thought we would ever need. What happened? We happened. His voice was flat now, heavy with old grief. We burned too much, built too much, fought too much. We changed our climate until our crops failed. We polluted our water until we could not drink it. We stripped our resources until nothing was left. She paused. By the time we realized what we had done, it was too late. Earth was dying, and we were dying with it. Considered this. Environmental collapse was not unknown among council species. Several civilizations had destroyed there through carelessness or greed, but most of those species had possessed faster-than-light technology. They had simply moved to new worlds. You had no way to escape, he said. Not at first. We had barely reached our own moon when the worst of the collapse began. Mars was still decades away from being habitable. We were trapped on a dying world with no way out. Turned to face him, and her eyes were fierce. So we built one. The generation ships. The generation ships. It took us 50 years to develop the technology. 50 years of cooperation between nations that had been enemies for centuries. 50 years of every scientist, every engineer, every worker on the planet focusing on a single goal: survival. And you succeeded. Some of us did, his voice grew heavy. The ships could only hold so many. Millions volunteered, billions were left behind. She closed her eyes briefly. We drew lots, Random selection, the only fair way. Kings and peasants, rich and poor, everyone had the same chance. And when the ships launched, those who remained. She trailed off. Did not press. He understood. The ones who had been left behind had died with their world. The ones on the ships had carried that grief with them across the stars, passed it down through generations. "I am sorry," he said, "for your loss." Opened her eyes and looked at him with something like surprise. "Thank you, Ambassador. That means more than you know." They continued through the ship. Saw hydroponics bays where food was grown. He saw medical facilities where doctors treated patients with technology far less advanced than Council standard. He saw schools where children learned about a world they would never see, a home that existed only in history books and old recordings. And everywhere he saw the humans themselves, small and soft and fragile, living their brief lives in metal boxes between the stars, working, laughing, arguing, loving, refusing to give up. "Ambassador," said Doctor, the science officer, as they passed through a laboratory, "I understand the Council will be conducting an assessment of our species." "That is correct," confirmed. "It is standard procedure for all new species seeking membership. We must evaluate your technological level, your social structure, your potential threat or benefit to existing members." "And what have you concluded so far?" Considered his answer carefully. "You are unusual. Your technology is primitive by our standards. You are short. Your bodies are fragile. By most metrics we use, you should not have survived long enough to achieve." "But we did," said quietly. "Yes, you did," turned to face her. "And that is what confuses me, Captain. You should have died on Earth, in space. 100 times over. Every logical analysis says your species should be extinct. And yet here you are, 50 million strong, spreading across the stars. Is that a problem?" "I do not know yet, but I intend to find out." They returned to the docking bay as the tour concluded, had seen enough to form his initial assessment. The humans were indeed primitive. Their technology was centuries behind Council standard. Their physical capabilities were limited. There were barely a century. And yet, there was something in their eyes, something in the way they moved, the way they spoke, the way they looked at the universe around them. It was not quite aggression, not quite ambition. It was something harder to define. Determination, perhaps, or desperation, or some combination of the two. "Ambassador," said as prepared to board his shuttle, "I want you to understand something. We are not here to cause trouble. We are not here to conquer or dominate. We simply want a place to live, a chance to rebuild what we lost. That is all." "I believe you," said, and he did. There was no deception in her voice, no hidden agenda in her eyes. These humans genuinely wanted only to survive. But survival could take many forms, and a species desperate enough to cross the void between stars in metal boxes, sacrificing generation after generation for a destination they might never reach. Such a species might be capable of things the Council could not predict. "I will make my report to the High Arbiter," continued. "I expect the Council will grant your request for territory. You have earned at least that much." Smiled, and this time the expression seemed genuinely warm. "Thank you, Ambassador. We will not forget this kindness." "See that you do not." Boarded his shuttle and departed. As the human ship dwindled behind him, he began composing his report in his mind. The humans were primitive, harmless, no threat to the Council or its members. But he would recommend watching them carefully. Because something in the back of his mind, some ancient instinct that had kept his species alive whispered that there was more to these soft, fragile creatures than met the eye. Much more. The Council's assessment team arrived 2 weeks later. They brought scanners and analysts and experts in every field. They studied the human ships, the human technology, the human biology. They interviewed thousands of individuals and analyzed millions of data points. When they were finished, They compiled their report and presented it to the full council assembly. Species human, read the chief analyst, unnamed, Earth destroyed. Current population approximately 52 million spread across multiple fleet groups. Technological level Class 7. Pre-FTL primitive manufacturing basic energy production. Physical capabilities limited. Average approximately 80 standard cycles. Threat assessment minimal. High Arbiter nodded from his podium. And your recommendation? The assessment team recommends provisional observer status. The humans should be granted limited territory in Sector 7, systems that are currently unclaimed by any council member. They should be permitted to trade and travel within council space, but should not be granted full membership until they demonstrate sufficient technological and social development. How long do you estimate that will take? Consulted his notes. Based on our models, we estimate the humans will require approximately 500 to 1,000 cycles to reach the technological baseline for full membership, assuming they survive that long. There was scattered laughter in the chamber. The implication was clear. These fragile, short-lived creatures would be lucky to last another few generations. Their primitive technology would fail. Their population would dwindle. They would fade away as so many other species had faded before them. It was almost sad, really. The vote was called. The motion passed easily. Humanity was granted observer status and given their allocation of territory, a handful of systems that no one else wanted. Rocky worlds, barren moons, places with no strategic value, no useful resources, no reason for any established species to care about them. The humans accepted these offerings with what seemed like genuine gratitude. Captain, now formally designated ambassador, attended the ceremony in person, wearing what the humans called their dress uniform. She thanked the council for its generosity. She promised that humanity would be a peaceful and productive member of galactic society. She shook hands with High Arbiter himself, a gesture that the found strange but not unpleasant. And then the humans departed for their new territories, and the council moved on to other matters. Within a few cycles, most delegates had forgotten about them entirely. There were more pressing concerns, trade disputes, border conflicts, the eternal negotiations between species that had been arguing for. The humans were a footnote, a curiosity, a primitive species that had somehow survived against all odds, granted charity by the benevolent council. They would struggle for a while, everyone assumed. They would build their little colonies on their worthless worlds, and eventually they would fail. It was inevitable. Ambassador was one of the few who did not forget. He maintained contacts within the human government, such as it was, and received regular reports on their progress. Most of what he learned confirmed the council's assessment. The humans were struggling. Their technology was inadequate. Their resources were limited. They were doing their best, but their best was not very impressive by galactic standards. And yet, there were small things that troubled him, anomalies in the data that did not quite fit the expected patterns. The humans were building faster than projected. Their manufacturing output exceeded predictions by a significant margin. Their population was growing more quickly than their resources should allow. When raised these concerns with the assessment team, they dismissed them. Primitive species often experience brief periods of growth, explained. It is not sustainable. They are burning through their resources faster than they can replenish them. Within a few generations, they will collapse. Are you certain? Asked. The models are quite clear, Ambassador. The humans are a Class 7 civilization. They cannot maintain this rate of expansion. It is mathematically impossible. Accepted this answer. The assessment team were experts. Their models had been accurate for thousands of cycles. If they said the humans would fail, then the humans would fail. But he continued to watch anyway. And in the dark spaces between the stars, in the worthless systems the council had so generously provided, the The humans continued to build. They did not know they were being watched. They did not know they were expected to fail. They simply knew that they had crossed the void between stars, survived the death of their world, and finally found a place where they could start again. And they were not about to waste the opportunity. In the crowded corridors of their generation ships, in the rough shelters of their new colonies, humanity looked up at the stars and began to plan. They had been given scraps, cast-off worlds, charity from beings who saw them as primitive, harmless, destined to fade. But the humans had a saying, passed down through the generations, from the time before the ships, from the world they had lost. They wrote us off. They said we couldn't make it. They said we were finished. And then they smiled that unsettling smile, showing all their teeth. They were wrong. In the empty spaces of Sector 7, humanity began to build, and the universe, unaware, continued to turn. But change was coming. And when it arrived, nothing would ever be the same. 50 cycles passed. In the grand halls of Station Prime, the Galactic Council continued its ancient routines. Treaties were negotiated. Disputes were resolved. New species were discovered and assessed and either welcomed or rejected. The great machinery of galactic civilization turned as it had always turned, steady and sure and unchanging. The humans were almost forgotten. Oh, they were still there, technically. They still held their observer status. Their ambassador still attended council sessions, sitting quietly in the back, rarely speaking, never voting. They paid their dues. They followed the rules. They caused no trouble. And so, like so many other minor species before them, they faded into the background. A footnote in the council's vast archives. A curiosity that had failed to live up to its initial intrigue. High Arbiter had not thought about the humans in years. He had more important concerns. They were demanding increased representation. They were threatening to withdraw from 3 major trade agreements. This position, as the Council's leaders, was being challenged by a coalition of younger species. Politics, always politics. So when Senior Analyst requested an urgent meeting, almost declined. He had no time for whatever minor crisis had caught the analyst's attention. But was persistent, and when she finally got through to him, the first words out of her mouth made him go very still. High Arbiter, we have a problem with the humans. Leaned back in his chair. What kind of problem? Have they violated their territory restrictions, broken a trade agreement? No, High Arbiter, nothing like that. His voice was strange, tight, almost afraid. They have done something far worse. They have exceeded our projections. Explain. Placed a data tablet on his desk and activated the display. A holographic image appeared, a map of Sector 7, the region the Council had allocated to humanity 50 cycles ago. Remembered that region, worthless systems, barren worlds, rocky planets and dead moons that no other species had wanted. But the map before him did not show barren worlds. This is current sensor data, said, gathered by a AL trade convoy that passed through human space 3 days ago. Stared at the display. The systems that had been empty were no longer empty. Icons representing settlements covered world after world. Orbital stations circled planets. Ship traffic, dense, constant ship traffic, filled the spaces between stars. This must be an error, he said slowly. We thought so too. We ran the data through every verification protocol we have. There is no error, High Arbiter. This is real. Rose from his chair and approached the display, his eyes scanning the impossible data. Show me the planetary surveys. Manipulated the controls. The display zoomed in on a planet designated KV-7, a rocky world with a thin atmosphere that had been noted as potentially habitable but would require centuries of terraforming. The current data showed a green and blue world, forests, oceans, cities. This is impossible, breathed. Terraforming on this scale takes thousands of cycles, the Council's best engineers. The humans did it in 37 cycles, interrupted. According to our analysis, they began the process almost immediately after receiving their territorial allocation. They used techniques we have never seen before, combined multiple terraforming methods, accepted risks that no council species would consider acceptable. What kind of risks? They crashed asteroids into their world's high orbiter, deliberately, to release trapped water and gases. They seeded their atmospheres with engineered organisms. They melted polar ice caps using orbital mirrors. They did in decades what we thought would take. Was silent for a long moment. Then he asked the question he was not sure he wanted answered. How many worlds? 12 fully terraformed, 23 more in progress, and that is just in the systems we allocated to them. Hesitated. High Arbiter, there are indications that the humans have expanded beyond their designated territory. What? Unclaimed systems on the border of Sector 7. Systems the Council never bothered to survey because they seemed worthless. The humans have claimed them. They are building there too. Felt something he had not felt in centuries. Fear. Cold, creeping fear that started in his chest and spread through his limbs. Their population, he said. What is their current population? Checked her data. Our best estimate is approximately 800 million, spread across multiple worlds and orbital habitats. 800 million. They had started with 50 million. In 50 cycles, barely a heartbeat by galactic standards, they had their numbers 16 times over. And their technology. That is perhaps the most concerning element. Brought up another display. When we first assessed the humans, they were a Class 7 civilization, primitive in every measurable way. Our models predicted they would require 500 to 1,000 cycles to reach Class 5, the minimum for full council membership. And now, took a breath. High Arbiter, based on current data, the humans are at Class 4, possibly Class 3. They have developed FTL capability. The words hit like a physical blow. That is impossible. FTL technology requires a theoretical foundation that takes to develop. The physics alone. They did not develop it from scratch. They borrowed it. Borrowed. The humans have been trading with council species since they arrived. They traded food, raw materials, manufactured goods, but they also traded information. They asked questions. They studied our technology. They took our principles and our theories and they what? His voice was barely above a whisper. They improved them. Stared at her. Improved council technology. Yes, High Arbiter. The FTL drives they have developed are not copies of ours. They are better, faster, more efficient. They took our work and made it their own, and in doing so they surpassed us. Turned away from the display and walked to the window. Outside, the stars glittered peacefully, unchanging and eternal, but everything had changed. Everything. Does Ambassador know about this? He was the one who brought it to our attention, High Arbiter. The AL convoy that passed through human space was under his orders. He has been watching them. Of course he had warned them all those cycles ago. He had said there was something different about the humans, something dangerous. They had not listened. Summon the ambassador, said, and convene the council, full assembly. We have much to discuss. The council chamber was in chaos. Delegates shouted over each other, their voices a cacophony of clicks, whistles, growls, and speech. The holographic displays showed the data from human space, and the 93 species of the Galactic Council were struggling to comprehend what they were seeing. This is an act of aggression, thundered Al, his massive form trembling with anger. They have expanded beyond their designated territory. They have developed weapons technology. They must be stopped. Stopped how? Demanded a delegate from the opposition bloc. If the reports are accurate, their military capability now rivals our own. A war with the humans would devastate half the council. Then we negotiate, demand concessions, force them to scale back their expansion. And if they refuse? The chamber erupted again. Let the arguments rage for several minutes before raising his arms for silence. "Honored delegates," he said, his voice cutting through the noise, "we are not here to declare war or issue ultimatums. We are here to understand what has happened and decide how to respond." "What has happened is obvious," said Ambassador, rising from his seat. The owl's compound eyes swept across the chamber and his voice was calm but heavy. "We made a mistake. 50 cycles ago we looked at the humans and saw what we expected to see. A primitive species, fragile, short-lived, no threat to anyone." "They were no threat," someone protested. Our assessment was wrong." His voice hardened. "We measured them by our standards, our metrics. We counted their technology and their physical strength, and we concluded they were inferior. We gave them worthless systems and expected them to struggle and fail." He paused. "But we forgot something important." "What did we forget?" asked. "We forgot what they had already achieved. These were not ordinary primitives, High Arbiter. These were beings who had survived the death of their world, who had crossed the void between stars in metal boxes, traveling for centuries, sacrificing generation after generation for a goal they might never reach. We should have asked ourselves, what kind of species does something like that? What kind of determination does it require? What kind of madness?" The chamber was silent now. Every eye was on the Owl Ambassador. "We gave them scraps," continued, "and they built an empire. We gave them worthless worlds and they transformed them into gardens. We gave them primitive technology and they studied it, learned from it, improved it. We treated them like children and they grew up so fast we never saw it happening." "What do you suggest we do?" asked. Was quiet for a moment. "I suggest we talk to them, not as superiors to inferiors, not as charity givers to recipients, but as equals, because whether we like it or not, that is what they have become." The debate continued for hours. Some delegates argued for containment. Others argued for alliance. Still others insisted that the data must be wrong, that the humans could not possibly have advanced so quickly, that there must be some explanation that did not require them to admit they had been wrong. In the end, a compromise was reached. The Council would send a diplomatic delegation to human space. They would assess the situation firsthand. They would open negotiations. And they would try to understand what they were dealing with. The delegation arrived in human space 3 weeks later. What they found exceeded even the most alarming reports. The barren systems were barren no longer. Everywhere the delegates looked, there was activity. Ships moved between worlds in constant streams. Stations orbited every planet, every moon, every significant asteroid. Factories produced goods at rates that dwarfed the Council's most industrious species. And the humans themselves were everywhere. High Arbiter had insisted on leading the delegation personally. He needed to see this with his own eyes. He needed to understand. They were received on the human capital world, a planet that had been a frozen rock 50 cycles ago and was now a temperate garden, complete with cities and forests and oceans. The human who met them was a woman named Director, great-granddaughter of Commander James, who had served under the first ambassador. She was young, by Council standards, barely 40 cycles old, and yet she spoke with the confidence of someone who had lived for centuries. "High Arbiter," she said, her hand extended in that strange human greeting, "welcome to New Nairobi. We are honored by your visit." Touched her hand carefully. "Director, we have come to discuss the recent changes in human space. The Council has concerns." "Of course you do," smiled, that unsettling expression that showed her teeth. "We've been expecting this conversation for some time. Shall we walk? I find it's easier to explain things while moving." They walked through the capital city and observed everything. The buildings were not elegant by Council standards, blocky, functional, efficient, but they were sturdy and well-maintained. The streets were clean. The people seemed healthy and content. "You have done much in 50 cycles," observed. "We had some catching up to do," replied. "When we arrived, we were centuries behind the rest of the galaxy. We couldn't afford to develop slowly, so we didn't." "Your FTL technology, where did it come from?" "We developed it ourselves, based on principles we learned from trading with council species. The energy theory was particularly helpful. Combined with AL manufacturing methods and some creative engineering on our part, we were able to build functional FTL drives within 20 cycles. The Council's engineers believed such development would take. With respect, High Arbiter, your engineers were wrong. They assumed we would develop the way Council species develop, slowly, carefully, testing every step before moving forward. But we don't have that luxury. Our lives are short. We don't have to waste on caution, so we take risks. We make mistakes. We learn quickly and move on. Consider this, and your expansion beyond designated territory." His expression became more serious. "The systems we've claimed were unclaimed. No council species wanted them. We didn't violate any agreements. We simply moved into spaces that were available. The council did not intend for you to expand so quickly. The council intended for us to fail." His voice was calm, but there was steel beneath it. "They gave us worthless systems and expected us to struggle and die. We decided not to." "That was not." High Arbiter stopped walking and turned to face him. "I mean no disrespect. The council welcomed us when we had nothing. They gave us a chance when we were desperate. We are grateful for that, but we are not fools. We know how we were seen: primitive, harmless, a charity case. We know the assessment team predicted we would be extinct within a few generations." Said nothing. There was nothing to say. She was right. "We don't blame you," continued. "By your standards, your conclusions were reasonable, but your standards are not our standards. You measure progress in centuries. We measure it in years. You value stability. We value survival, and survival for us has always meant growth." "You speak as if there is conflict between us," said carefully. "Is there?" asked. "We have not attacked anyone. We have not violated any treaties. We have simply grown faster than expected. Is that a crime?" "Some on the council believe it is a threat." "And what do you believe?" High Arbiter was silent for a long moment. He looked at this young woman, this representative of a species that had crossed the void between stars in metal boxes, survived the death of their world, and risen from nothing to become a galactic power in barely 2 generations. "I believe," he said slowly, "that I do not understand your species at all, and I believe that frightens me." Nodded. "That's honest. I appreciate honesty." She resumed walking and fell into step beside her. "Let me tell you something, High Arbiter, something about humans. We are afraid too, all the time. We're afraid of death, afraid of suffering, afraid of being forgotten. Every human knows that their life is short, that they will grow old and die while the universe continues without them. That fear never goes away. It lives in our hearts every moment of every day. But here's the thing, that fear doesn't paralyze us, it drives us. Because we know our time is limited, we refuse to waste it. We build things. We create things. We reach for things that seem impossible, and sometimes we catch them. Not because we're brave, because we're terrified of dying without having mattered." She stopped at a viewpoint overlooking the city. Below them, millions of humans went about their lives, building and working and dreaming. "The Council has existed for 12,000 cycles," said. "It has achieved great things, but it has also grown comfortable, complacent. You expect change to happen slowly because it always has. You assume you have time because you always have. And humans do not. Humans never have time. We're always racing against the clock, and that makes us dangerous, not because we're hostile, but because we move faster than you expect. We change faster. We adapt faster. By the time you realize what we're doing, we've already done it." Turned to look at her. "What are you doing, Director?" Smiled again. "Right now, We're building a future, a place where humans can live and grow and thrive. We're not trying to conquer the galaxy or overthrow the Council. We're just trying to survive. But we're going to survive on our terms, not anyone else's. And if the Council tries to stop you, then you'll learn something else about humans, High Arbiter. Her smile faded and her eyes grew hard. We don't stop. We don't give up. We've survived ice ages and plagues and wars and the death of our own world. We've crossed the void between stars. We've built civilizations from nothing. And we've done it all while being told it was impossible. She leaned closer, and her voice dropped to almost a whisper. Don't make the mistake of underestimating us again. You won't like what happens. Returned to Station Prime with a heavy heart. His report to the Council was stark and honest. The humans are no longer a minor species, he told the Assembly. They are a rising power. Their technology rivals our own. Their population continues to grow. Their territory continues to expand. And they show no signs of slowing down. Then we must act, Al growled, before they become too strong to stop. It may already be too late for that, replied. And even if it is not, war with the humans would devastate both sides. They would fight. They would fight to the last being, the last ship, the last breath. I saw it in their eyes. They have survived too much to surrender now. Then what do you propose? Looked around the chamber, at the 93 species that had ruled the galaxy for 12,000 cycles. I propose we accept reality, he said. The humans are here. They are growing. They will continue to grow. We can fight them and destroy ourselves in the process, or we can work with them and hope to shape the future together. The vote was closer than anyone expected, but in the end, the motion passed. Humanity would be elevated from observer status to full membership. They would have voting rights, territorial rights, all the privileges and responsibilities of any other council species. And the galaxy would have to learn to live with them. As the delegates filed out of the chamber, Ambassador approached. Do you think we made the right choice? The Al asked. Sighed, I think we made the only choice. The humans were going to rise with or without our permission. At least this way, we have some influence over how they rise. And if they rise too high? Had no answer. He simply stood at the viewport, watching the stars, and wondered what the future would bring. Far away, in the green and growing worlds of human space, Director received word of the Council's decision. She smiled, that unsettling human smile, and called her advisors to begin planning the next phase of expansion. The universe had finally noticed them. And humanity was just getting started. They came from beyond the edge of known space. They had been out there for, growing and spreading through regions the Council had never bothered to explore. They were conquerors, destroyers. They moved from system to system, stripping worlds of resources, enslaving populations, leaving nothing but ashes in their wake. A dozen civilizations had fallen to them before anyone in Council space even knew they existed. The first warning came when a patrol ship detected an unknown fleet moving through the outer territories. The ship transmitted a brief message before going silent. Hostile contact, unknown configuration, overwhelming numbers, request immediate. Then static. High Arbiter received the report in his private chambers. He read it twice, then summoned his military advisors. Within hours, the Council's intelligence network had pieced together what they were facing. The hegemony, an empire of conquest that spanned hundreds of systems beyond Council space. Their technology was different from anything the Council had seen, brutal and efficient, built for war. Their ships were massive, armored, bristling with weapons, and there were thousands of them. How did we not know about this? Demanded. His chief intelligence officer, a named, looked uncomfortable. The territories are far beyond our survey range, High Arbiter. We had no reason to explore in that direction, and they appear to have been approaching slowly, carefully, studying us before making their move. Studying us? Yes, Based on the trajectory of their fleet, they have been in the outer territories for at least 10 cycles, observing, learning. By now, they likely know as much about Council defenses as we do. Felt cold, what do they want? Based on their history, everything. They do not negotiate. They do not compromise. They conquer or they destroy. We have perhaps 3 months before their main fleet reaches Council space. The Council convened in emergency session. For the first time all 93 species set aside their petty disputes and faced a common threat. Military commanders presented plans. Industrial leaders pledged resources. The greatest mobilization in galactic history began. But as the weeks passed and intelligence reports continued to flow in, a terrible truth became clear. It was not going to be enough. The fleet outnumbered the Council's combined forces 3-1. Their weapons were more powerful, their ships were more heavily armored, and they had been preparing for this war for decades, while the Council had grown soft in centuries of peace. "We cannot win a direct engagement," admitted Admiral Eth, the commander who had been placed in charge of the combined fleet. "If we meet them in open battle, they will annihilate us." "Then what do you suggest?" Al demanded. "Defensive positions, fortified systems. We slow them down, bleed them, hope that we can make the cost of conquest too high to bear." "And if it is not too high?" Admiral Eth had no answer. The Battle of Nebula was supposed to be the Council's first line of defense. Was a strategically vital region, a natural where the Council had built defensive stations, laid minefields, and positioned their strongest fleet elements. If they could be stopped anywhere, it would be here. They were not stopped. The fleet emerged from hyperspace like a swarm of steel locusts. There were more ships than the intelligence reports had predicted, many more, and they moved with a terrible coordination, flowing around obstacles, absorbing losses without slowing, pressing forward with relentless determination. The first Council defensive line lasted 4 hours before it collapsed. The second lasted 2. By the time the main battle began, the Council fleet had already lost a quarter of its ships. And then things got worse. They had weapons the Council had never seen before. Beams of energy that cut through shields like they were not there. Missiles that split into dozens of smaller projectiles, overwhelming point defense systems. Their largest ships had armor so thick that even concentrated fire could barely scratch them. Admiral Eth fought bravely. Her tactics were sound. Her crews performed beyond all expectations, but it was not enough. By the end of the first day, the Council fleet was in full retreat and they were advancing into Council space. The news spread quickly. 3 of the 93 member species surrendered within days, hopping to save their worlds from destruction. They accepted their surrender, then burned their planets anyway. "They do not take prisoners," Ambassador reported grimly. "They do not honor treaties, they simply destroy." The fell next. His own world, where his species had lived for hundreds of thousands of cycles, was reduced to rubble in less than a week. The High Arbiter himself barely escaped, fleeing on a transport ship as the sky behind him filled with fire. From a refugee vessel somewhere in the chaos of retreating fleets, broadcast a message to the entire galaxy. "This is High Arbiter of the Galactic Council. We are under attack by the hegemony. Our defenses have failed. Our worlds are falling. We call upon any who can hear this message to send aid, any ships, any weapons, any help at all." His voice broke slightly. "We are dying, please, if anyone is listening, please help us." The message went out across every channel, to every corner of known space. And somewhere in the green and growing worlds of human territory, someone was listening. Director received the distress call in her office on New Nairobi. She listened to it once, then twice. Then she summoned her advisors. The room filled quickly. Military commanders, industrial leaders, scientists and strategists. They crowded around the conference table, their faces grim. "The Council is losing," said flatly. "They have broken through their defenses. At current rates of advance, they will reach the edge of human space within 6 months." "That assumes they come here," said General, the commander of human military forces. "They may focus on Council worlds first. And after they've finished with the Council, what then? They won't stop, they never stop." Looked around the room. "The question is simple, do we wait for them to come to us or do we go to them? If we go to them, we reveal our military capability," another advisor pointed out. "The Council still doesn't know what we can really do. They think we're advanced, but they don't know how advanced. And if we stay hidden, the Council falls and we face the alone." Shook her head. "That's not a better option. They have been conquering civilizations for. Their fleet is enormous. Even with our advantages, we need allies." "The Council hasn't exactly been our friend," someone muttered. "No, they underestimated us. They treated us like children. They gave us scraps and expected us to be grateful." His voice was hard. "But they also gave us a chance. When we had nothing, when we were refugees from a dead world, they let us in. They could have turned us away. They could have destroyed us. They didn't." She stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city below. Millions of humans going about their lives, unaware of the war raging in distant space. "My great-grandmother came to this galaxy with nothing," said quietly. "She was on the Endeavor's Hope, one of the first-generation ships to reach Council space. She told stories about Earth, about the blue sky and the green forests and the world we had lost. She told stories about the journey, too, about the darkness between stars, about the fear and the hope and the desperate determination that kept them going." She turned back to face her advisors. "She used to say that humanity's greatest strength was our ability to help each other. Even when we had nothing, we shared what we had. Even when we were afraid, we fought for those who couldn't fight for themselves. It's who we are. It's who we've always been." "Director," General said carefully, "if we intervene, there's no going back. The Council will know what we can do. They will know. The entire galaxy will know." "I know," his jaw tightened. "Call the fleet, all of it, every ship we have." "All of it, Director, that's everything we've built in 60 years, our entire military capability." She smiled grimly. "The Council thinks they know us. They think they know the galaxy. Let's show them both how wrong they are." The human fleet assembled in deep space, far from prying eyes. It took 2 weeks to gather every available ship, and when the assembly was complete, it was a sight that would have made the Council's admirals weep with envy. Humanity had not been idle during their decades in Council space. They had studied every technology they could access, improved every design they could understand, and built ships that were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The warships were not elegant, they were brutal, ugly, angular blocks of armor bristling with weapons. They had been designed for one purpose: to kill enemy ships as efficiently as possible. No luxury, no comfort, just engines, weapons, and enough armor to survive long enough to use them. At the head of the fleet was the flagship, UES Determination. At its helm stood Admiral, granddaughter of the original captain, named after the woman who had first welcomed the Council's ambassadors aboard the Endeavor's Hope. She was 60 years old by human standards. Her hair had gone gray and her face was lined with decades of service, but her eyes were sharp and her voice was steady as she addressed her fleet. "You all know why we're here. They are destroying everything in their path. The Council that gave us shelter is falling. In 6 months, maybe less, they will be at our doorstep." She looked out at the assembled ships, at the hundreds of thousands of crew members who had volunteered for this mission. "We could stay hidden, let the Council fight their own battles, hope that when they come for us, we can hold them off alone." She shook her head. "That's not who we are. We didn't cross the void between stars to hide from our problems. We didn't survive the death of our world to let others die when we could help." She raised her chin, and her voice hardened. "They think they're unstoppable. They've conquered dozens of civilizations. They've never faced anyone who could beat them. A cold smile crossed her face. They've never faced humanity. The fleet jumped to faster-than-light travel, heading for the nebula. They had established a forward base in the nebula, using it as a staging point for their advance into Council space. Their fleet was scattered across the region, hunting down the remnants of the Council's defenses, destroying anything they found. They did not expect anyone to come to them. The first warning they had was when sensors detected an approaching fleet. The commander, a massive creature named, studied the readings with confusion. The approaching ships did not match any known Council design. Their energy signatures were different. Their configuration was unlike anything in the database. "Identify," he growled. Unable to identify, his sensor officer replied. "Unknown vessel types, unknown weapons configuration, unknown propulsion systems." "How many?" A pause. Then, in a voice tinged with something that might have been fear, "Approximately 12,000 combat vessels, plus support ships." Went very still. 12,000. That was more than the Council had fielded at any point in the war. Where had they come from? A communication came through. A single transmission directed at the fleet. "Hegemony, this is Admiral of the United Earth Coalition. You have attacked our allies. You have destroyed their worlds. You have killed their people." A pause. "You made a mistake." Laughed. The sound was harsh and ugly. "You dare threaten we have conquered 100 civilizations. We have destroyed species that were old when your kind was crawling in the mud. What are you?" "We are humanity," replied calmly, "and we are going to teach you something the Council never could." "And what is that?" "Fear." The human fleet opened fire. The Battle of Nebula, the Second Battle of Nebula, lasted 11 hours. In the first hour, they learned that human weapons were more powerful than anything they had faced before. Beams that cut through their armor like it was paper. Missiles that tracked and adapted, evading countermeasures with impossible precision. Torpedoes that detonated inside their shields, tearing ships apart from within. In the second hour, they learned that human tactics were unpredictable. The human ships did not fight in the orderly formations the Council used. They swarmed. They flanked. They attacked from unexpected angles, then before they could respond. They sacrificed ships to create openings, trusting that their comrades would exploit them. By the third hour, they had lost a quarter of their forward fleet. By the sixth hour, half. Watched his forces crumble and felt something he had never felt before: doubt. "These creatures," he muttered, "they fight like they have nothing to lose." His first officer, bleeding from a wound on his head, spoke grimly. "They crossed the void between stars in primitive ships, Supreme Commander. They watched their world die and refused to die with it. They have lost everything before. They are not afraid of losing again." They tried to retreat. The humans did not let them. For every ship that tried to flee, 3 human vessels pursued. For every escape route, there was a blockade. The humans herded the fleet like animals, cutting off stragglers, surrounding the main force, pressing closer and closer. At the 11th hour, flagship was surrounded. Its weapons were destroyed. Its engines were crippled. It hung in space, helpless, as human ships closed in from every direction. A communication came through. Admiral's face appeared on the screen, calm and cold. "Your fleet is destroyed," she said. "Your invasion is over. You have 2 choices: retreat from Council space forever or die here. Choose now." Stared at her. This small, soft creature. This being from a species they had never heard of until today. She had done what no one had ever done before. She had beaten him. "How?" he whispered. "How did you do this?" His expression did not change. "You underestimated us. Everyone underestimates us. They see our short lives and our fragile bodies and they assume we're weak. They forget that we've been fighting to survive since the day we were born. We fight wars with each other. We fight diseases. We fight time itself. Every human is born knowing that death is coming for them, and every human chooses to fight anyway. She leaned forward slightly, and her eyes were hard. You've been conquering civilizations that have forgotten how to struggle. They're old, comfortable. They've never had to fight for every breath the way we have, but we remember. We will always remember. Was silent for a long moment. Then slowly he lowered his head. We will retreat, he said. We will not return. See that you don't, because if you do, if you ever threaten Council space again, we will come for you, and next time we won't offer a choice. The transmission ended. The fleet, what remained of it, limped away into the darkness between stars. And across the nebula, scattered among the debris of 100 destroyed ships, the human fleet hung victorious. Admiral stood on the bridge of the Determination and allowed herself a single moment of exhaustion. They had lost ships, good people. The cost had been high. But they had won. A message came through from Director on New Nairobi. Her voice was thick with emotion. Admiral, the Council is broadcasting your victory across the galaxy. The survivors are calling you heroes. High Arbiter himself wants to speak with you. Nodded slowly. Tell him I'm on my way. We have a lot to discuss. She looked out the viewport at the stars, at the nebula stained with the fire of battle. Humanity had made its choice. They had revealed themselves. There was no going back now. Whatever came next, they would face it the same way they had faced everything else. Together, and without fear. The war was over, they were gone. But the galaxy would never be the same. In the weeks following the Battle of Nebula, the full scope of what had happened began to sink in. The Council, the ancient, powerful, 12,000-year-old Galactic Council, had been saved by a species that had been granted charity status barely 60 years ago. A species that everyone had written off as primitive, harmless, destined to fade away. The humans had not faded, they had risen, and they had done the impossible. Station Prime was being rebuilt. The original structure had been damaged in the advance, though human forces had arrived before it could be destroyed completely. Now, human engineers worked alongside Council species, repairing what had been broken, improving what could be improved. High Arbiter watched the reconstruction from his temporary quarters on a refugee ship. His was gone. His people were scattered across a dozen systems, living as guests on the worlds of species they had once looked down upon. Everything he had known, everything he had built his life around, had been reduced to ashes. And yet somehow he did not feel despair. He felt something else, something he had not felt in centuries. Wonder. A knock came at his door. He turned to find Ambassador standing in the entrance. High Arbiter, the owl said. Director has arrived. She is requesting an audience. Nodded slowly. Show her in. A few minutes later, Director entered the room. She was alone. No guards, no aides, no ceremony. Just a single human woman dressed simply, her expression calm and thoughtful. High Arbiter, she said, offering that strange human gesture, the extended hand. Thank you for seeing me. Touched her hand briefly. The gesture still felt strange, but he was becoming used to it. Director, please sit. We have much to discuss. They sat across from each other in the small quarters. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then broke the silence. Your people have suffered greatly. I am sorry for your loss. Inclined his head. We all have suffered. Many species lost worlds in the advance. Many more lost loved ones. He paused. But thanks to your intervention, we still exist. The Council still exists. That is more than we had any right to hope for. We did what we had to do, said simply. Though we're a threat to everyone. If we hadn't stopped them, they would have come for us eventually. It was in our interest to fight. Perhaps, but you could have waited. You could have let the Council fall and face the alone after they had exhausted themselves in conquest. It would have been the tactically sound decision. Smiled slightly. It would have been, but it wouldn't have been the right decision. The right decision. High Arbiter, humanity has made a lot of mistakes in our history. We've done terrible things to each other and to our world. But we've also learned something important. You can't survive alone. No one can. We tried to go it alone on Earth, every nation looking out for itself, and we nearly destroyed ourselves. It was only when we started working together, really working together, that we managed to save what was left of our species. She leaned forward, her eyes earnest. The Council took us in when we had nothing. You gave us a chance. Yes, you underestimated us. Yes, you treated us like charity cases, but you didn't turn us away. You didn't destroy us. And when the time came, we remembered that. Was silent for a long moment. Then he asked the question that had been burning in his mind since the battle. How, he said, how did you become so powerful so quickly? Our assessment teams are the best in the galaxy. Our models have been accurate for thousands of cycles, yet we completely failed to predict what you would become. Considered the question carefully. Do you really want to know? I need to know, not just for myself but for the Council. We need to understand what we are dealing with. All right, settled back in her chair, let me tell you a story. When the first generation ships left Earth, they carried about 10 million people. Those people knew they would never reach their destination. They knew their children would never reach it. They knew they might never reach it. They launched anyway because the alternative was extinction. For 400 years, those ships traveled through the void. Generations were born and died without ever seeing sunlight or feeling wind or walking on solid ground. They lived in metal boxes, surrounded by darkness, sustained only by the hope that someday, their descendants would find a new home. Think about what that does to a species, High Arbiter. Think about the kind of people it creates. Every generation, born and raised knowing that their entire purpose is to keep the ship running, to pass on knowledge and resources to the next generation, to sacrifice their own comfort for a future they will never see. That's not just survival. That's faith. That's determination on a level that most species never have to develop. Listened intently, his eyes never leaving her face. When we finally arrived in Council space, continued, we had been forged by 4 centuries of struggle. We had learned to make do with limited resources. We had learned to solve problems quickly because slow solutions meant death. We had learned to work together because in a generation ship, there is no room for petty conflicts. Everyone's survival depends on everyone else. But the technology, said, your ships, your weapons, your industrial capacity, none of that can be explained by determination alone. No, agreed. The technology came from something else, something that I think the Council has never really understood about us. And what is that? We learn fast, smiled, really fast because we have to. Think about it, High Arbiter. Your species lives for 1,000 cycles. You have time to study things slowly, to approach problems carefully, to test every theory before moving forward. But humans, we're lucky to see 80 years. We don't have time to be careful, so we take risks. We make mistakes. We learn from those mistakes and move on. We iterate rapidly, trying new things, discarding what doesn't work, building on what does. When we arrived in Council space, we were centuries behind technologically. But we had access to your knowledge, your theories, your discoveries. We studied everything we could get our hands on. We asked questions that Council scientists thought were too basic to be worth asking. We combined ideas from different fields in ways that seemed irrational to species who had been doing things the same way for. And we figured things out, not because we're smarter than you. We're not, but because we're faster. We compress centuries of research into decades because we don't have centuries to spare. Process this. It made a terrible kind of sense. The Council species had always approached science methodically, building on proven foundations, never taking unnecessary risks. It was a stable approach, a safe approach. But it was also slow. There is something else, he said, something I observed during the battle. Your tactics were unprecedented, suicidal by our standards. You sacrificed ships to create openings. You took risks that no council commander would ever take. Yes. Why? Was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that makes blood run cold. Because we're not afraid to die. She held up a hand to forestall his response. That's not quite right. Let me explain. Humans are terrified of death. We fear it more than almost anything. But we've also accepted it. Every human knows that death is coming for them sooner or later. We can't escape it. We can only choose how we face it. In the battle, our commanders knew that some ships would be lost. They knew that some crews would die. But they also knew that if they didn't take those risks, everyone would die. So they made the choice that humans have always made. Sacrifice some so that others can live. It's not bravery exactly. It's math. Cold, terrible math. And your crews accepted this. They volunteered for it. Every person on those ships knew what they were signing up for. They went anyway, because that's what humans do. We face impossible odds and we fight anyway because the alternative is giving up, and we don't give up. Sat in silence for a long time. He thought about everything he had learned about humanity over the past 60 years, their determination, their adaptability, their willingness to sacrifice, their refusal to accept limits that others thought were absolute. He had spent his entire life believing that the Council was the pinnacle of galactic civilization, that they and the other elder species had achieved everything worth achieving, that younger species could only hope to follow in their footsteps. The humans had proven him wrong. "Director," he said finally, "I owe you an apology." She raised an eyebrow. "For what?" "For underestimating your species. For treating you like primitives when you were anything but, for failing to see what was right in front of me." He shook his head slowly. "We measured you by the wrong standards. We counted your technology and your physical strength, and we concluded that you were inferior. We never thought to measure your will." "Most people don't," said. "It's an easy mistake to make." "Perhaps, but it is a mistake that nearly cost us everything." Rose from his chair and walked to the viewport. Outside, the stars glittered peacefully, unchanged by the wars and struggles of mortal beings. "The council session will be held tomorrow. We will be discussing humanity's status in the new galactic order." "I know. I intend to propose that humanity be granted not just full membership, but a permanent seat on the High Council itself, equal status with the elder species." His expression flickered with surprise. "That will be controversial." "Yes, many species will object. They will argue that humanity is too young, too aggressive, too unpredictable. They will say that 60 years is not enough time to prove yourselves." He turned to face her. "They will be wrong." "Why do you say that?" "Because I have finally understood something, Director. Something I should have understood 60 years ago when we first met your ships on the edge of Council space." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "The universe does not belong to the strong or the intelligent or the long-lived. It belongs to those who refuse to give up, to those who look at impossible odds and fight anyway, to those who would rather die trying than live accepting failure." He took a step toward her, his forearms spread in a gesture of openness. "Humanity crossed the void between stars in metal boxes. You survived the death of your world. You built an empire from nothing. You saved the Council from destruction. And you did all of this in 60 years, a heartbeat by galactic standards." His voice grew soft. "I do not know what the future holds, Director. But I know this. Whatever challenges lie ahead, I want humanity standing beside us when we face them." Was silent for a long moment. Then she smiled, that strange, unsettling expression that showed her teeth, and extended her hand once more. "High Arbiter," she said, "I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship." Took her hand and shook it, the human gesture feeling almost natural now. "I hope so, Director. I truly hope so." The council session the next day was the largest in recorded history. Representatives from all surviving member species crowded into the rebuilt assembly hall. Human observers sat among them, no longer relegated to the back rows. High Arbiter took his place at the central podium. He looked out at the gathered delegates, 91 species now, after the losses of the war, and began to speak. Honored delegates, we are gathered here to discuss the future of our galaxy. The war with the has ended. We have survived, but we have also been changed in ways that we are only beginning to understand. He gestured to the human section, where Director sat with her advisors. 60 years ago, a fleet of primitive ships emerged from the quarantine zone. They carried refugees from a dying world, beings who had crossed the void between stars using technology that was ancient by our standards. We assessed them. We granted them charity. We expected them to fail. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. We were wrong. His voice grew stronger, carrying to every corner of the hall. In 60 years, barely a heartbeat by galactic standards, humanity has risen from nothing to become one of the most powerful civilizations in known space. They have terraformed worlds. They have developed technology that surpasses our own. And when our defenses crumbled and our worlds burned, they came to our aid. They saved us. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. I have asked myself many times, how did this happen? How did we fail so completely to see what humanity would become? And I believe I finally have an answer. He turned to face the human delegation directly. We measured them by the wrong standards. We counted their technology and their physical strength. We did not count their will, their determination, their refusal to accept limits that others thought were absolute. He turned back to the assembly. Humanity is not like us. They are not patient. They are not cautious. They are not content to wait for the universe to change around them. They change it themselves with their own hands by sheer force of determination. And that makes them dangerous, yes. But it also makes them valuable, because the universe is not a safe place. To prove that. And when the next threat comes, as it surely will, we will need allies who are not afraid to fight. Allies who will not give up, no matter the odds. He raised his arms in a gesture that encompassed the entire assembly. I propose that humanity be granted full membership in the Galactic Council, with all rights and responsibilities that entails. I further propose that they be granted a permanent seat on the High Council, equal in status to the elder species, not as charity, not as reward, but as recognition of what they have proven themselves to be, our partners, our allies, and our equals. The chamber erupted in debate. Some delegates objected, as had predicted. They raised concerns about humanity's aggression, their unpredictability, their potential threat to the established order. But others spoke in humanity's defense. Species that had been saved by human intervention. Species that had traded with humans and found them honest. Species that had simply observed them over the years and come to respect what they saw. In the end, the vote was called. The motion passed. Not unanimously. There were still holdouts, species too proud or too afraid to accept the new reality. But it passed with a comfortable majority, enough to make the decision binding. Director rose from her seat and walked to the central podium. She stood beside, looking out at the assembly that had once dismissed her species as primitives. Honored delegates, she said, her voice calm and clear, on behalf of humanity, I accept this recognition. We are honored to stand among you as equals. She paused and her expression grew serious. But I want to make something clear. We did not come here seeking power. We did not come here seeking dominion. We came here because we had nowhere else to go. Our world was dying and we refused to die with it. We crossed the void between stars because the alternative was extinction. She looked around the chamber, meeting eyes of every shape and color. That desperation has driven everything we have done. Every world we have terraformed, every ship we have built, every battle we have fought, all of it was in service of a single goal, survival, not conquest, not empire, just the simple, primal need to continue existing. Her voice softened. The Council gave us a chance when we had nothing. You let us in when you could have turned us away. And yes, you underestimated us. You treated us like children, but you also gave us something precious. Hope. Hope that we were not alone in the universe. Hope that there was something worth surviving for. She smiled, that strange, unsettling, wonderful expression. We have not forgotten that, and we never will. Whatever the future holds, humanity will stand with the Council. We will face it together as partners, as allies, as friends. Because that is what we have learned in all our long years of struggle. No one survives alone. We need each other, all of us. She raised her hand in the human salute, a gesture of respect that the Council was beginning to understand. For the Council, for all our peoples, for the future we will build together. The chamber was silent for a long moment. Then slowly delegates began to rise, one by one, then in groups, then all at once, 91 species standing in honor of the newcomers who had saved them all. And in that moment, something changed. The galaxy had a new member, a new power, a new future. And nothing would ever be the same. Later, when the ceremony was over and the delegates had dispersed, found standing alone at a viewport, looking out at the stars. "Director," he said, coming to stand beside her, "a remarkable speech." "Thank you, High Arbiter." She did not turn from the viewport. "I meant every word." "I know." He was quiet for a moment. "May I ask you something?" "Of course." "What do you see when you look at the stars?" Was silent for a long time. Then she said softly, "I see possibilities. I see worlds we haven't discovered yet, civilizations we haven't met, challenges we haven't faced." She turned to look at him, and her eyes were bright with something that might have been tears. "I see a future that my great-grandmother dreamed of when she set out from a dying world with nothing but hope, a future where humanity has a place among the stars, a home." She looked back at the viewport. "We've come so far, High Arbiter, but we're just getting started." Followed her gaze. The stars stretched out before them, infinite and unknown. "I believe you, Director," he said, "and I look forward to seeing what you accomplish." Smiled. "So do we, High Arbiter, so do we." They stood together in silence, two beings from vastly different worlds, watching the stars. And somewhere out there, in the vast darkness between the lights, the future was waiting. Humanity had arrived, and the universe would never be the same.